Okay, okay. Well, it's Clear Vision Wednesday. I think we are live on YouTube. It's always hard to tell. I am super excited to be here today. My name is Claudia Mühlenweg. I am the founder of the Myalgic Clear Vision Institute. And every Wednesday, we bring you very important information about vision and how you can improve your eyesight naturally and your vision, not just your eyesight. That's an important distinction. Today's topic is super interesting because first of all, I don't know that much about it. I'm excited to learn about it. And I have a special guest. Our topic is the vision brain connection in long COVID. So for all of you that had long COVID or have long COVID, or maybe you don't even know you have it, I'm excited to have Dr. Jenny Tufukian on. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi. Thank you, Claudia, for having me on here today. I'm very excited to talk with you and to meet your audience.
Thank you for being here. And this is, I'm always saying I'm kind of selfish too, because I want to learn all these things too. So tell us a little bit, you're a naturopathic doctor, you've been practicing, I think, for over 2 decades, and you have a specialty with long COVID, chronic fatigue, and those kind of symptoms, right? Tell us a little bit, how did you get into this?
I got into this through my own life experience. Becoming a naturopathic physician was a huge passion of mine, and that was great. Second year medical school, I decided it was time to have a second child, had a multiple miscarriages, including a second trimester miscarriage at 17 weeks, hemorrhaged, passed out on my bathroom floor, rushed to the hospital. And that triggered a huge cascade of issues in my body and really threw me into what I call a dark night of the soul. We have a physical body, a mental, emotional, and an energetic body. And when all three of those are down, you are down. And that was me. I was in bed, had IVs in my arm, just trying to stay alive. People seriously thought I might die at that time. It took me a few months to get out of that state and be able to get down to the couch. But I ended up getting what was then called chronic fatigue syndrome, is now called myalgic encephalitis. I had to take a whole year out of medical school, and then I sort of crawled my way back in, still sick for years until I really understood what it was that led to my getting sick and was able to uncover the puzzle. And then I recovered 150%. I had another kid. I was teaching at the naturopathic college as a clinical faculty member. I opened up clinics in Portland, super successful practice. Didn't think I'd ever get chronic fatigue again, and then I did. Perfect storm of injury, severe pain, perimenopause, all those things again crashed my system, which is why I learned that if you've ever had chronic fatigue or long COVID, myalgic encephalitis, you are susceptible to get it a second time unless you understand what your root causes are and you can stop it before you go down that fast downhill slide. And those of you who have been there, you know what I'm talking about. It is a fast downhill slide down and it's not fun. That second time was a huge gift. I was able to really understand the 5 root causes that lead to chronic fatigue. And that's now what I'm working with when people come in to see me, is really helping them understand what are their root causes, why did they get into this situation, and what steps does their unique body need to take to get back into balance. I also got COVID, and it was very interesting because I had a couple of health foundations that were not doing well during the pandemic, and that made my body very vulnerable to get COVID. I have to say that as a physician, everything's experience for me. And so as much as it's been a drag to be experiencing this myself, it's also really, really helped me understand what it's like from the inside. And I can see which protocols are really beneficial for this particular strain of chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalitis. So it's been my journey for
Oh,
decades. Yeah.
that's quite a journey of like, I've never experienced anything like this myself. But
Yeah.
so you basically, my question, and also, have you noticed any changes in your vision? Because I'm curious about when you
Mm.
had the chronic fatigue initially and then the long COVID,
Mhm.
like what did you notice about your vision? And maybe let's backtrack actually into like what are the symptoms of long COVID? And I
Mhm.
know it's not
Mhm.
the same for everybody, but tell us a
Right.
little bit about what those symptoms are. I think fatigue is one, clearly, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so long COVID can come on weeks or months after you had your COVID infection, which makes it very confusing for you and your practitioners to diagnose. I think practitioners are getting better at recognizing this condition. It's a compilation of symptoms. It's usually fatigue. You might have some shortness of breath, breathing problems. There are different, COVID impacts people in different ways. And one of the ways it can impact people is through the nervous system. The virus loves to live in the nervous system. It loves to irritate the nervous system. And the COVID virus can reactivate other things in your body. So the COVID virus, you may not have the COVID virus anymore, but it may have reactivated a chronic infection that was latent in your body, like a cytomegalovirus or Epstein-Barr virus. And those may be in your nervous system and cause inflammation in your nervous system. It can also really create a higher, what we call histamine situation. So you're just more reactive to everything. So maybe you had a little bit of mold in your house or your car, or a little bit of biofilm in your sinus pathways that your body was kind of dealing with, okay? But then when you got COVID, it activated and got your immune system to this heightened inflammatory state. So now that little tiny thing just triggers you. Or the same thing, food sensitivities. I know that my gluten sensitivity just became way, way, way more sensitive after I got COVID. Um, I was so excited about oat milk. No, no way. Can't do oat milk. Even if it says it's from gluten-free oats, cannot do it anymore. My body is not happy with that. So you can have an increased sensitivity. How do you know you have long COVID? You really need to work with a practitioner and go through your symptoms because the symptoms are very non-specific. You can look at a list and you could think, oh, I have long COVID, or I have candida overgrowth, or I have Lyme disease. Like there's no real way of knowing unless you work with a practitioner to help you really get specific about what it is. And be sure to go to a practitioner who understands long COVID, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis. It's a complicated illness, but I do want to say, just because it's complicated, it's not mysterious. For the people that you work with who do understand it, they can help walk you through what it is, why your body is doing these crazy things, and what it is that you need, the steps you need to take to get your body back regulated again. Somebody who's dealing with long COVID, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis, and I do see them as the same thing, they're really dealing with a dysregulated neurological immune system. And that has a cascading effect on many other systems in the body, including the hormonal system and the whole immune system, the nervous system, and that includes the eyes. So to answer your question about vision, the first times I had chronic fatigue, I really wasn't aware of my vision or any changes with it. But what I found very interesting is that there are 5 root causes to chronic fatigue, and I was very aware of those when I had long COVID. One of those is mitochondrial dysfunction. And that's how I knew I was getting long COVID on day 9 of my COVID infection. Day 7, I felt pretty good. I had a productive cough. I felt like I'd had a really good, efficient fever. My body was responding really well. I was like, great, I'm nailing this thing. Day 9, I woke up and it was as if the Death Star in Star Wars was going down and had sent out a million drones, and they had all landed inside my cells, inside my mitochondria, and were sucking the energy dry out of there. I woke up and I was too tired to go down the stairs. I had made a cabbage salad the day before. Chewing that cabbage salad was just too much energy for me. I'm like, I need somebody to just make me soup. I was exhausted. And because I knew what it felt like, this was just overnight, I am back in chronic fatigue syndrome. So I knew it had impacted my mitochondria. I also felt like there was this kind of like electric bolt energy on my nervous system. And I know a lot of people out there have had weird symptoms from COVID. Weird pains, weird nervous systems, anxiety they never had, depression, sleep problems. That's all impacting your nervous system. I felt like something was on my vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve in your body and connects to your limbic brain, your emotional brain, and all the different organs in your body. I felt like there was something on there going like this. And it was just like this energy and like the strangulation of this thing. And it was felt overwhelming to my body. And because I was blessed to know what it was, I was able to do a lot of things to keep my physiology from freaking out from that stimulation. One of the things that I noticed after a bit of time was that I was having a hard time with visual stimulation. A couple things happened. One, I had what's called a vitreous humor event, where the vitreous humor in my body, in my eyes exploded. And it's like having, you have floaters. All of a sudden, I had chunks of gooey fluid in my eyes. And I had what's called an ocular migraine, which I'd had before, but it was very severe and I had it for most of a day. That triggered my limbic brain in a way that was so interesting to me. I was studying to present to a bunch of physicians on long COVID, and I was reading a whole bunch of research papers, and I couldn't get my eyes and brain to work in the same way I used to. Usually, once I start reading lots and lots of papers, my brain kind of goes into this hyperspace mode, where I just absorb a ton of information, I can synthesize it. And that wasn't happening. And I realized it was because my reading speed was so much slower. And because I had to learn how to look through that thick, gooey, vitreous humor, my limbic brain, my emotional brain was interpreting on a subconscious level that I was experiencing a stress. And because I have a pattern of trauma in my background, as all of us do,
Yeah,
it
right.
was triggering my limbic brain, and I was going down this pathway of getting incredibly exhausted. While I was doing this research, I found myself so tired. I'm like, why am I so tired? This is so weird, like on the couch, tired. And then I realized it was my limbic brain. And once I did limbic retraining, I was able to get my energy back up. And so that was one of the first signs I had of that. This is really interesting how my eyesight is impacting my limbic brain, which is impacting my energy. And then the second thing that happened was about 6 months into having long COVID, I was driving with my son, and he's a teenager, and he makes a comment, "You're driving like a preschool teacher." I'm like, it doesn't sound like a compliment. And so really what he was saying is, you're being really kind of slow and cautious. And I had noticed that I was not feeling as confident as a driver. I felt like I had to look at over my shoulder like 4 or 5 times to be sure I felt safe turning into the next lane. I felt like I didn't really want to drive at night when there are lights coming in my eyes. I felt like I would choose a side road over a highway or freeway if I could. And I was sort of making these decisions all the time, and I just wasn't excited about driving, which was different for me. Like I actually grew up enjoying driving and being good at driving. And I went in to have an exam with a neurological optometrist and found out that my eyes and my brain were not tracking in the right place. And what can happen is that when you have long COVID, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis, get this, and or a traumatic brain injury, anytime in your history, you can have chronic brain inflammation that can alter your your brain's interpretation of what you're seeing. And that can trigger that limbic brain into a stress response. And some of the symptoms of this are feeling more anxiety, having emotional overwhelm, and not like I was having a hard time with all that visual stimulation. The grocery store all of a sudden is just too much for you. Or the flashing lights. You might feel nauseated or get headaches and those kinds of things when you're around too much. And so those are some of the signs that that's how I really began to understand this connection between the eyes, the limbic brain, the nervous system, and then the patterns that develop around chronic fatigue and long COVID. And I just have to say, because this is just popping in, now I'm realizing that I actually did have this the first time when had chronic fatigue. I was so exhausted and I was in bed and I had to be walked to the bathroom. I was that tired. Weeks into this, I had to go into the doctor's office and I had to go in. And I remember being in the car and driving. I couldn't look out the window. I had to have my eyes shut, like all the stimulation from all the movement in the car. I couldn't handle it at all. There was no way I could do it. So there really is this huge connection, as you know, between the nervous system, the brain, and the eyes.
What a fascinating example and story of all the symptoms. And yes, it makes total sense, right?
Right.
Our eyes are connected to the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we are stressed, it's kind of a vicious cycle, right? Stress
Yes,
makes barrier, shuts down the peripheral vision, and then
exactly.
drive, you're like all the moving things. So
Right.
yeah, so basically, so you were diagnosed by a neurooptometrist.
Mhm.
These are the like those are the optometrists that actually work with vision in helping you, because vision is a brain-based thing for all of us, and those are not the optometrists that just slap glasses on you. So that's a big difference to notice, because they actually help people with, like you said, either fusion problems or strabismus or traumatic brain injury, or what you had, the long COVID or chronic fatigue, because there is this brain inflammation. It affects the whole system. So that is super interesting. So I'm curious, what did they give you as a kind of a protocol, or what kind of treatment did you get from the neuro-optometrist?
I wish I had a picture to share with you. They did prism glasses, and it looked really fun when they were trying them on, because I looked really funny and weird with these glasses with like 6 different kinds of lenses on them. And as soon as I put those on, I felt better. And I found myself walking before I had the glasses, I would bump into walls. I had this leftward kind of collapse thing. I'd be walking out of the bathroom and kind of bump the door jamb. I felt like I was swerving a little bit. It was easy to become afraid that there was a brain tumor, or I was having some sort of deeper brain issue going on. And as soon as they put those glasses on, I remember walking down the hallway in the clinic and just saying, thank you. My brain felt better just having those prism glasses on. And those prism glasses are a retraining mechanism. They help your eyes and your brain learn how to communicate correctly. And now I've graduated out of them. They also recommended that I do color therapy, and the color therapy is something that's been more currently researched to help really trigger that limbic brain. And it's a very fascinating process where they begin to look at how your pupils are responding to light, and how you're tracking different things in space and time, and using color to retrain that processing in the brain. And I found that very relaxing and therapeutic. And then they also recommended eye exercises, but I actually ended up not needing them. I just did the eye therapy, and I didn't do the eye exercises. Their eye exercises were different than yours. Their eye exercises, or as you said, they were just kind of, move, move, move kind of thing. And the physicians there said you have to be careful to not start those eye exercises too soon. So a brain that's super inflamed, if you just jumped into aggressive eye exercises, it can really short circuit your whole brain. Your whole brain can feel like it's overwhelmed, and signs of that would be nausea, headaches, feeling dizzy, feeling worse. And they taught me a trick if that ever happens, which is you can just put your 2 fingers like this and just go like this and close your eyes, and somehow that recenters your nervous system to calm yourself down. Just keeping that as a tip for those of you who need it.
It's a very cool thing. So you just,
Right?
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
it's very true. Can I say something before you
Please,
continue? So, yeah, in my method, if anything, I would call it relax exercises. So we do a lot of thing of the eyes. We do a lot of light. So the therapy I know as Syntonics, which is administered by optometrists, and we had an amazing basically, I think she's a behavioral optometrist on, who was trained in Syntonics, and they probably gave you some blues and purples. I'm not a trained Syntonic practitioner, but right, to calm your whole nervous system. And I actually 100% agree with what you said, the exercises, because we might have to train, but initially we just have to relax and calm everything down. And then for specific things. And I actually had prism glass as a kid, but not because of what you had. I had strabismus, so I would bump into things. I was crossing in. So can you explain prism glasses, or do you want me to do it? Just explain a little bit, like, what do they actually do, and why are they so great as a transitional tool? An example of long.
You probably will do a better job than I will, so why don't you go for it?
Yeah, so I mean, we probably remember, right, Pink Floyd, the album with the prism, but basically prisms bend wide, right? And so in my example, it was you talked about your eyes were not like they were kind of not coordinating, right? Right? You had like your eyes were my right eye was going in, and so if that's the case, then either each eye sees a different image, which is very confusing. You have double images, or you shut the feed from one eye down. So a prism basically, even though the right eye is looking at the nose, makes it like bends the light in a way that as if the eye were both looking straight and working together as a pair. So it helps you to practice that stereo vision again, which gives you depth perception, the peripheral field, like all of those things. So yeah, I love that you talked about it was a transition tool. So it's not like for the rest of your life you had to wear those glasses, right? So it's kind of helping you to kind of put all the pieces back together.
Yeah, yeah. And as you know, and I'm sure many of your listeners know, the more when you're in that sympathetic fight or flight stress state, we're very narrow visioned. We need to know where to run through the woods away from the tiger. And yet when you're stuck there from a physiological inflammation, like from long COVID, chronic fatigue, it's very easy to stay in the survival mode, which continues the vicious cycle of the dysfunction of your whole immune and nervous system. And if you can then get so that you can start practicing seeing in a more peripheral way, then that can trick the nervous system into feeling more safe. It's one of sort of the back door, side door ways into calming down the nervous system, which I think is what's brilliant about what you do, Claudia, because your relaxercises, you're really working on that sympathetic, parasympathetic tone through using the eyes. And using that relaxation response that we have. There are all these different ways, just putting pressure on your eyes, like you were explaining to me before we went live. You're explaining to me how you use that. That pressure on the eyes itself goes to this reflex in the heart, which can really calm down the nervous system and make us feel very safe on a subconscious level, which is just beautiful that you're triggering that response. I love it. It's very healing.
So you weren't really done with what the protocol. So you eventually also got some eye exercises, but only after everything else was kind of calmed down and you were actually ready. Right? It's like I liken it to you're super fatigued, you can barely get out of bed, but now you're supposed to like do some biceps curls, right? It's like that doesn't make sense. So what else did they prescribe, or what else would you prescribe somebody in terms of when they have those visual problems?
So really for the visual problems, I refer out for people to work with with the neurological optometrist and to do work, on their eyes. But I know that if they're having those symptoms, and there can be other symptoms where it's very clear to me that somebody has brain inflammation. So if you have brain fog, if you can't remember why you walked in the room, you're having trouble with word finding, you used to be able to remember where you parked your car and now you can't. You find yourself lost somewhere, which I have done. When my brain was really inflamed with mold, I was driving down a street that I knew extremely well. We owned the building 2 blocks away from there. I knew it super well. And I was driving on it and I was completely lost. I didn't know where I was. And that was from brain inflammation from mold. So there are signs that your brain can be inflamed. And what we're finding is that this is going on with people with long COVID, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis, and it's a vicious cycle. When the brain gets inflamed, it doesn't have a stop signal. It continues on. So if you sprain your ankle playing basketball, shooting hoops, it has a 72-hour cycle where it peaks in its inflammation. It gets all red, and that's to keep you from re-injuring it. And so you rest it. And it sends off pain signals. Your brain doesn't have that same cycle. Once your brain gets inflamed, it kind of stays inflamed and it doesn't have the pain signal to tell you to stop. Its signal to tell you to slow down are things like anxiety, depression, feeling exhausted, having brain fog. These are the signs that your brain is inflamed. And it's really important to step in there with some kind of protocol that can help dampen that inflammatory cycle. Things that I would use, there are pharmaceuticals that can be beneficial for this. In the natural world, I love using things like turmeric. Turmeric's an amazing anti-inflammatory and also helps build up the connections so you can rewire your brain with that neuroplasticity and helps your healing. Things like essential oil of frankincense. If you have something that is pharmaceutical grade, you can take that internally or topically, and that also helps with those connections. There are very powerful antioxidants that are amazing for this, as are the really good oils. So the omega-3s in the algae form, or clean fish oil, and also your really good green raw olive oil, your omega-9s, all fantastic anti-inflammatories. There are also things that you can do with diet. So we know the standard American diet is horrendous. It promotes inflammation everywhere. And I want to be clear that a lot of these visual changes that lead to inflammation, it's not from just banging your head and hurting the optic nerve area. We're talking about generalized inflammation in the brain that impacts the vision and also just can cause these symptoms of brain fog and brain fatigue. And that generalized inflammation can be It can be that flame can be turned up with what you eat, or it can be calmed down from what you eat. And so there's a lot of lifestyle that you can do to reduce that brain inflammation.
First of all, I want to say we're obviously not giving any medical advice here. This is pure educational. But thank you for sharing some of those things. And that obviously overlaps with like, a lot of,
Yeah.
we just know that those things are good for us, but then the dosage and how to do that, you please work with a practitioner like Dr. Jenny. But any other like things that you recommend in terms of the diet? Like what are, you mentioned a few things, but anything else that you feel is really helpful to keep the brain not inflamed? So what's the opposite?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the diets that have been the best studied for these are the ones that are lower carbohydrate diets. So Dr. Walls has done some research. Dale Bredesen has done a lot of research on his ending Alzheimer's. Those diets tend to be the best. So sort of more of a paleo type of diet. There are ways of doing this vegan for those of you who prefer to have a vegan diet, but it's being really, really, really conscious of what you're putting in your body. Choosing foods that are high in flavonoids. So the colorful foods, your blueberries, your raspberries, your cherries are really the fruits that are really high in flavonoids. You're eating the rainbow of vegetables, making sure you've got some beets in there, you've got your yellows, your greens, your reds, all the whole eating the rainbow, all of that is very, very helpful because there are antioxidants in there that help reduce that inflammatory process. Again, I mentioned the high fats. If they're good fats, those are great. Avoiding things like sugar and fried foods, alcohol, caffeine, all the fun stuff. Sorry, I know. But the truth,
Really? Caffeine?
for most people, caffeine. There are some people that can handle caffeine quite well, and it actually works as an anti-inflammatory and a stimulant for some people. There are others of us that have a hard time processing it, and it
How
makes
do
us.
you know? How do you know? I think in my genetics it said I probably drink coffee, but I love coffee. I've given up all the other stuff.
Yeah,
But how do you know if you're good with coffee or not?
I think there's two ways. There's one way, there are tests that you can do where you can look at your liver function and your detoxification pathways, and you can do caffeine challenge tests with those.
Oh,
The
okay.
second way is just to see how you feel. But
Okay,
you have to
great.
be honest. You have to be honest with yourself.
Well, super helpful. There was a question on YouTube earlier, but I see it's deleted now because I want to go back to that. You had the vitreous. I mean, that sounded very scary. So I have my little eyeball over there, but the vitreous tumor is that gel-like structure that sits behind the lens in the back of the eye that holds the eyeball in kind of its place, right? Otherwise, it's like it would deflate like a balloon. So you said that exploded, and instead of floaters, you had all these chunks. So tell us what happened to your vitreous tumor and that sounds very scary. I mean, having these chunks in there. Like, did that ever recuperate or what exactly is
So
going on?
my very regular conventional optometrist told me that it's extremely normal, happens to people around my age. It's very common that that happens. And what's really fascinating is that it has not gone away, but my eyes have got and my brain have gotten used to looking through them. And it takes about 6 months to a year for your brain to retrain to learn how to see through it. And that's what was happening when my limbic brain was getting triggered was I was in that retraining process, and part of me felt scared because it wasn't how it used to be on an unconscious, subconscious level. Part of me did not feel safe with the fact that I could no longer read at the speed that I was used to. And I didn't understand why. But once I understood that's what was happening, I was able to calm down my nervous system and my limbic brain and then just focus on it learning how to read through goo, which is what it does now.
Yeah, I mean, we hear of post-vitreous detachment, whereas the vitreous detaches in the retina, where you might have some kind of half moon light flashes on this
Different.
side. Obviously,
It was not a retinal detachment. It was it's a bit different. Yeah, it was not that
yeah,
shaking down of darkness. That's an emergency room visit
yeah,
immediately, keeping your head as still as you can. That is instant go to the 911 if you're in the
yeah.
United States, 999 if you're in Britain.
I was talking about vitreous detachment, whether you have the half moon. So that's retinal detachments is super scary. You're absolutely right. You have to really go. But vitreous detachment, usually the doctor said that's normal. I never liked that idea that this thing is normal and it happens to a lot of people. Floaters are also, some people have floaters, some people have don't floaters. And there's some study from Taiwan that suggested bromelain, the enzyme in
Yes.
pineapple, supposedly helps. I I don't know if that's really true or not. There was only one study done.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically your brain, and that's what I also teach sometimes, like, yes, the floaters are there, but also, learning to, because we don't really know any super effective treatments, and maybe the bromelain is the thing to really completely get rid of that, right? There's some
Right.
laser, they also have consequences and side effects and, risk factors. And
Right.
so, yeah, I mean, I don't see any. So there was a question about dry eyes and Sjogren's syndrome, and that is
Mhm. Mhm.
connected to a sign of fatigue.
Mhm.
Uh, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Sjogren's syndrome is part of an immune system disorder, compilation of symptoms, and you can have dry eyes from that. And anytime anybody has an autoimmune condition, which is not really unlike long COVID and chronic fatigue, I think you can argue that there is an autoimmune-like response happening in some aspects of that, so it's not that different. I think treating your underlying root causes of that autoimmune condition. Anytime you have an autoimmune condition, your body has decided to attack your own tissues, and I believe for a reason. I don't believe we're wired to just randomly start attacking ourselves. I believe, and it's my experience, that there's something in those tissues that your immune system is reacting to. It may be a virus, it may be a heavy metal, it may be a toxin, or maybe it's something that looks like something like your body and it's getting confused. It's a thing called molecular mimicry. These can all be causes to having an autoimmune condition. So my experience is people come in with autoimmune conditions and have symptoms. And when we can really do a deep look at what it is that is going on with their body, what's going on with their health foundations, there are 5 central health foundations. What root causes might be triggering this in them? Do they have a toxic, one of them is looking at the hormone triangle, your adrenal, your thyroid, your ovaries, if you're female, male testes. What's going on? Do you have chronic infections that are activated or reactivated? Do you have a toxic exposure, mold, mycotoxins, heavy metals, glyphosates? Do you have some sort of mitochondrial dysfunction going on that was either genetic or something that your body has fallen into due to your toxic overloads? That's very common. A lot of us have that, where the viruses get into the mitochondria, where we create energy, or heavy metals get in there and they can't function. They're sick and tired little energy powerhouses, so we're exhausted. That also means that the body can't, the cells start not functioning as well and can misfire and start attacking their own tissues if the mitochondria is not working well. Or the 5th root cause is looking at that limbic emotional piece and what's going on with that nervous system, that limbic brain piece. So when we can really look at all of these and in an autoimmune condition as well, and get to the root cause, and so that we can get that system to start becoming more balanced. It doesn't mean that your autoimmune condition technically goes away, but I've seen many people be able to move into remission, which has been exciting for them. And then once you know your triggers, you can avoid them. Now, in terms of just regular having dry eyes, I mean, there are things that we can use topically and internally and things like that that can help with those dry eyes. But I'm going to hold back from that because it's going to sound a heck of a lot like treatment recommendations if I jump into that.
And we had whole episodes on dry eyes. I was just curious about the connections of Sjogren, dry eyes, and how that might be connected to what we're talking about today. There is a question, I don't know if you can answer that. So when somebody rubs their eyes too much, we know that rubbing your eyes is very connected to keratoconus and I think also to astigmatism, to corneal imbalances. So obviously rubbing your eyes could be one reason could be they're itchy, right? They just feel like you just want to rub them because they're itchy. I mean, I know you're not the eye doctor, but anything that comes to mind that could be connected to our discussion here, why somebody might want to rub their eyes.
They're tired. I mean, in terms of our connection, I think being tired, I think just having too much stimulation and your eyes being one of the things that's telling you I'm tired, and you're just kind of, really what you want to do is close your eyes sometimes. And I think sometimes we rub our eyes. If you think about little kids, what are they doing? What do they do? Just
They
as a
rub their
natural
eyes.
thing, they're like,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like this, like too much. And I think there may be something going on there. That's something I would definitely consider and look at. Do you just need to close your eyes for a few minutes every once in a while and take some really nice deep heart-centered breaths and calm down your nervous system? Would that help instead?
I love that. We teach palming, which is like where you cup your, you close your eyes, you rest them, cucumber slices. But I love the idea. It's simply because you're tired, especially since we have the topic of fatigue.
Exactly.
I almost didn't think I'd like little babies, they automatically do that when they're tired. Yeah, so I think it's usually itchiness. Sometimes it's just a bad habit, and it's like it also feels good, right? I mean, we're not supposed to put Q-tips in our ears, but we know that the ears are connected to the vagus nerve, so it just feels good too. And um, I don't see any other questions on YouTube, so I would love for you to tell us. I think you have a quiz that people can take. Well, tell us a little bit, and I can put the link in the YouTube. It's already under the YouTube, this video. But tell us a little bit about that quiz and where else people can find you.
Absolutely. So the quiz is if you feel like you're tired or you know somebody who's dealing with low energy and you're curious what could be causing that, I created a quiz where I go through and ask you a bunch of questions and it pops out an answer to let you know which might be your root cause. Which of those 5 root causes I went through, which one might be yours? It's a really fun quiz to take. Highly recommend you check it out. You can find it on my website at drjennytafankian.com, and you can also find it at tiredtypequiz.com. And in terms of, you had another question for me too.
No, I mean it was really like I'm just posting all your links also in the YouTube chat,
Right.
your YouTube, your Facebook, your Instagram. But in terms of getting like the quiz is probably a really great place to get started and going to your website, which I also put in the descriptions. Anything else that you feel like you want to share that we haven't covered yet?
I really want to say for those of you who are out there who are struggling with low energy, or you know somebody who's struggling with low energy, if you find yourself saying no to social events because you're not sure you can really make it through, you'd rather just go to bed. If you find yourself really struggling through your afternoon, after lunch, you just feel like you need to take a nap. If you find yourself not as excited about life and doing the things you used to love to do, I really encourage you to get checked out by somebody who understands long COVID, chronic fatigue, and myalgic encephalitis, because it's one of those conditions that I find is extremely underdiagnosed. And once you understand that that's what you have, there are so many things that you can do to address it to get your energy back. It's not because you're getting older. It's not because you have kids. I hear this all the time. People are told, oh, honey, you've got 3 kids, or oh, honey, you're turning 40. It's not that. We all know people with 6 children. We all know people who are 95 and still have energy. We can have it too. And I'd say to those of you who might be listening to this, who are really struggling and know you have chronic fatigue, long COVID, myalgic encephalitis, keep knocking on those doors. I know there's a way for you to get your body back into balance. And it's for you to keep having that hope that you're going to find the solution that fits for you. It is not one size fits all. Each of us has a unique body, and it takes a unique personalized approach to really find healing. And the power of healing is in your hands. You can find the guide to support you so that you can get the answers you need so you can have the life you deserve to have.
I absolutely love this because we often hear from society or friends like exactly those excuses or,
Yeah.
and I don't want to blame all the doctors here, the traditional, but a lot of times, yeah, it's just common. But really noticing, and obviously hormonal changes, they do have changes in our life, but
Yes.
noticing when something was different before and all of a sudden, like, and I think this is the awareness piece that's so important that we become more aware of things that we're noticing, right? Notice what you're noticing, becoming aware. Like you said, initially you didn't notice about your vision, but now the second time around, you had more. So sometimes it's hard for us to like be like, well, why do I have almost all of a sudden more headaches, or why do I
Yeah.
don't want to go out in the evening? And just really like maybe even journaling or just keeping track of those things, because I think that's something that from my own experience, sometimes we go to the doctor and they ask us about all those things, and you're like, I don't know, I don't remember,
Right.
so
Right.
kind of
Right.
bring
Right.
back. And you look glowing. I mean, you look, I'm just saying, like, you are living proof
Mhm.
that you can overcome this, right? So it just takes it. You need the support. You need the support. It's just like the same with vision. It's like it's extremely challenging. Yes, there's a ton of stuff out there on YouTube, right? We are on YouTube right now. But at the end of the day, it's it for me, YouTube are those things. I mean, I don't know what you think about it, is enough to understand and be like, okay, I get like I see the connections, but then really we can't help ourselves. We really need somebody, a guide to help us, whatever, in whatever shape or form that is, right? So that's my own experience with my own health and also with my own vision. And overall, like, you can educate yourself and you can come to the doctor and find the right doctor also based on your education. I think that makes a big difference in understanding who to trust versus who you think is just, any, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as we both know JJ Virgin, who says you can't read the label if you're inside the jar. It's very hard to understand what's going on with you. I love how much information is available to us all now through YouTube and online. And I think it can be a really great way for us to, um, for lack of a better word, do shopping in the sense of see what resonates, see what clicks. I know when I was dealing with fatigue, it was listening to a summit where I learned about limbic brain dysfunction. And then I did a deep dive and research into it and healed myself with it. And now I can help many others do that. And I only learned that through this kind of format that we learn from now. And I love that. And that's why I love being here with you, Claudia, because I know that there's somebody out here who's going to listen to this who needs to hear this information. And so that it can turn on this, oh, maybe that is what I'm dealing with. Oh, there are answers out there. And then this can start the journey for you of your exploration. So I think that this can be in a fantastic way. And then, yeah, we all need those experts and guides to really help us dig in deep when we need to. There's some things that we can do on our own. And then there are some places where we're just like, if you're kind of circling the drain and not going, not getting where you want to go, you got to be like, I need help. Get on the phone and find that person to support you.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. This was an incredible discussion. And obviously, for those of you watching this later, when the live is over, you can always comment underneath and we will, answer. We do our best to answer all the comments or respond to everybody's questions. And if I have one that I can answer, I'm definitely going to send that to you, Dr. Jenny. So thank you so much for being here.